Okay, let's go ahead and get started on this. I see that Blackheart is in the stage here real quick. So let me go ahead and invite him to speak. We're going to be covering our Unreal Engine tutorials from here on out. Hey there, Blackheart.
Hello.
How's it
How you
going?
doing?
Not bad, not bad. So for those of you that, maybe you're, you know, coming into my stream right now, or maybe you're not really aware of what we're doing at this in this particular hour, but we're going over the Unreal engine, trying to study it so that we can prepare, Blackheart and I, for constructing something ourselves later down the line. But first, we need to know what we're doing. We need to know what the engine can do, what it's all about, and hopefully be able to make something ourselves. Um, Most likely 2D to start off with, and then we'll go from there. Um, but first, we need to kind of learn, um, all the tools that Unreal Engine has to offer, and then, try to um, build something simple. Just kind of start off with kind of learning everything that we've experienced so far, try to apply it to something that has already been made and like apply what we learned, and then that will kind of reinforce everything that we've learned so far, and then we'll take that into our very own construct, whatever that might be, right?
Right.
All right. So, um, last time we were kind of working on the ambient zones, where you know we were, um,
We tested out adding ambient zones ourselves
yeah, yeah,
to one of our levels.
yeah. The in the ambient zones section, there was a talking about how on the creating an ambient zone, how to actually create two different you know ambient volumes and then testing that out. Applying two different sounds to those ambient sounds, and then you know seeing what happens when you enter one and leave the other, and vice versa. Um, but we covered that the other day, so we're good on that.
Yep.
The next one down that they have is the auto modulation overview. Um, and according to the very top of the page there, it's talking about how this is a beta feature. So this is so we might need to be careful about trying to use that um, for any 4.0 or 4.27 version build that we make. For maybe they'll have it in Unreal Engine 5. Don't really know. Maybe they do. Um, we'll have to figure that out when
Yeah.
we
It's
eventually get there. But
unknown. Yeah. It's unknown to us what they kept from 4 and what they didn't.
yeah, I mean, you know, someday we'll help Blackheart get himself a better computer, and then we'll step up into Unreal Engine 5. But for right now, we're sticking with 4.27. So, um, you know, we'll go from there. Okay, so um, uh, this is a really large section, though. My gosh, for it being a
Yep.
beta. Whew.
Yeah, but it's pretty sizable.
Yeah, it's hefty.
Yeah. I don't even know how much of it is even going to be useful.
Yeah, especially if it's beta, we we don't know if we're going to be even touching upon this at all. I mean, it might be useful depending on what it's doing. Um, but like it says, if we do try to use it, you know, we might be encountering some, unknown errors if we apply it to a build of ours.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they'll like address that per se. You know, um, are they going to give us some tools saying, hey, if you do use this, make sure to like maybe surround it with a try catch and catch it with this particular error or something like that. I don't really know. Hopefully they'll address it, but we'll see.
We'll see. We have bumped into a lot of things that they weren't addressing.
Yeah. All right. All right. So let me go ahead and get into this here, talk about this, and hopefully we'll understand a little bit more. So the audio modulation system provides control over common floating point audio parameters from the blueprint and component systems. The system includes a better, more intuitive, and dynamic subset of features for mixing audio sources and for dynamically controlling and parameter. I always have a hard time pronouncing that. Parameterizing audio properties than Unreal Engine has had in prior versions. Okay. Um. hmm, Not too much I can glean from that right off the bat. So I guess,
Hmm.
I mean, unless there's something that you're like picking up on a little bit from there, but we
Nope.
can move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
The system exposes a generic, flexible, decoupled generic parameter modulation and mix system. Okay. I mean, obviously I know about like, volume mixers and adjusting various volume levels or so based off of, what you're trying to go for per se. If they're trying to do something like that in the engine, then sure. I mean, that kind of makes sense, but at the same time, hmm, um, well, I mean, no. I mean, even if you were to take like an audio file like back to modify it through like another audio software or something like that, it's still going to be a hard time for you trying to match it with other sounds at the same time, right? Unless you have your own software that you can kind of mix and match different sounds together to try to see, what works and what doesn't, right? So
Yeah.
I guess what they're trying to do is they're trying to do something like that, but in game or in the engine itself, so you don't necessarily need to worry about that, you know, outside of it.
Maybe. Maybe.
Not sure. Well, we'll move on. Establishes a more robust set of tools for auditioning and debugging, or auditioning and debugging a game's mix. So that's sounds like I was kind of on the nose on that a little bit. Provides an API that can be easily extended and used for further modulations of sources, effects, submixes, and various other audio types via plugins. So, so yeah, it's feeling like this one's kind of meant to be its own audio mixer built into the um, Unreal Engine. So,
Sounds like that, yes.
I mean, that can be very useful, especially if you're like trying to like, hey, you have one soundtrack that's kind of playing in the background, and you're trying to like figure out like does the does the music in the background work with these ambient sounds at the same time? Maybe they're clashing too much, or maybe they're not synced together very well, or whatever. And hard to say, right?
Hmm.
So audio modulation is a powerful way to modulate virtually any float or buffer-based parameter with an Unreal Audio engine. In the most basic form of modulation, a user can connect a modulation source to a modulation destination. Okay, I'm not quite sure exactly what they mean by modulation source per se.
Don't know either. I'm no
Um,
sound expert, so I'm not
y-
exactly sure.
yeah, if no source is referenced, a default value, as provided by a modulation parameter, is mixed together with value supplied as a default modulation destination value. Hmm. Okay. So I'm hypothesizing here. I'm not again not 100% sure, but that's the only thing that I can think of at this moment in time. So their float or buffer based parameter is in a sense their modulation source, I would imagine. Um, so they're basically trying to place that like somewhere within the overall, audio engine, modulation destination so that, you don't have any like problems or, you're adding the audio file into the Unreal Audio engine so that it can handle it properly so that, you know, um, everybody can hear it, but, you know, not sure what it means by a default value is, um, nor what a modulation parameter is all about. Now, obviously, there's some links here, but um, we can probably hold off on those for right now. Um, but yeah, I'm a bit. Oh wait, um, it these are links to the same page. Okay, we're
They're
gonna.
further down below,
Yep, they're
apparently.
further down below apparently. Okay, I was about to say I'm like on. Wait, what?
Yeah, why does it lead to the same page? Why not do like some pages to just scroll to where that is automatically?
I don't know. Well, I mean, if you click on it, then yes, it does. But still, I just decided to open it up in another window, which I mean, okay. Or I tried doing another tab, but it's like okay, they're on the same page. No big deal. Um, so this scenario can be thought of as plugging a traditional hardware patch cable into a modulation input, with the output end connected to a known quantity such as a ground or voltage source. The output end connected to a ground or voltage source? What? Hmm.
Eh?
That seems um a little odd.
uh,
Um,
yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, I know, like, hey, you want to ground your, you want to make sure that anything that you have, electricity wise has some form of ground. So if there's ever a, um, power spike in some fashion or another, you know, it has a way of, you know, um, making sure that that electricity kind of goes, you know, out from the main system so that it doesn't cause any damage or anything along those lines, right?
Mhm.
So, I get that, but um, this sentence still kind of makes me confused because it's like, wait, um, plugging a traditional hardware patch cable into a modulation input with the output and connected to a known quantity. I don't know. I'm not well versed in audio to really know what exactly they're
Mhm.
talking about there.
Neither am I.
So um, we'll move on. I mean, if anybody has any formal training along those lines and can answer said questions, then please feel free to do so, whether it's like in chat or when we upload these videos, on our YouTube channels. Feel free to leave a comment. Um, but yeah, we're gonna move on. So enabling auto modulation. So all modulation features are encapsulated in the auto modulation plugin and implement a lightweight engine side API. Okay. Enabling the plugin, then restarting the editor or rebuilding a Visual Studio enables Unreal's native implementation of the audio modulation system. Okay, that sounds simple enough. Modulation values. All modulation values can be transformed between two value spaces, the unit value space and the normalized value space. The unit space is displayed and provided as a means of convenience to the editor, while the normalized space provides a uniform way of passing and mixing bus values. Okay. All modulation values map to a normalized range in a similar way to how a hardware synthesizer might use a control voltage as a standard for passing a value from a source to a destination. The modulation system uses control buses that always contain values within the normalized float range. Oh boy. Okay. Unfortunately, this is getting into a lot of sound design that I am not familiar with, and
Yeah.
my mind is kind of being blown up right at this moment in time. So I don't know how much I'm going to be able to maintain any of this.
I
Um,
don't know. Like I don't even know if we'll even rely on it too much.
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I can understand the importance of good audio and good audio construction. Don't get me wrong. I understand that, but at the same time, I'm not one that dabbles in it like on a constant basis. I'm not messing around with mixers all the time myself. I'm not like in a recording studio with a mixer, helping out on a recording session or anything along those lines. So I don't really know. Um, so um, if we get to a point where we might need that, then oh boy, are we? Am I gonna feel in trouble if they're basically gonna say, hey, you're gonna need to do this? It's like, ugh. Okay, well,
Yikes.
I'm in trouble.
We'd both be in trouble.
Okay. Um, but I mean, hey, if we're gonna, there might be a time where we may need to, hire ourselves someone that can handle this, handle the audio properties, and even then, handle music, sound effects, all the, everything that is concerning, the sound. We might need to actually, bring in someone that is very experienced on that. But at the same time, that might not be something that we can do right away either. So
No.
it's one of those things where it's like, right now we may need to put on that hat sometime in the future. Yeah. Not exactly something that um, I'm going to be looking forward to too much.
Neither will I.
Okay. Um, so taking the place of the volume, the unit of space may be the range between 60 decibels, threshold of silence, which is configurable via the modulation parameter, or 0 decibels, full volume, where the normalized values map logarithmically to the normalized space of zero point 0 f and 1.0 f. Semitones is another example where a minimum and maximum value of plus or minus 12 in unit space can be configured in its respective modulation parameter settings. The normalized space always maps between 0 and 1.0 in the most basic case. The unit and value space are identical, namely all unit values corresponding to the same normalized value between 0 and 1. Yeah. um,
Okay.
don't get me wrong. I understand when you're hearing something, it's always kind of talked about in terms of decibel range. So that much I'm understanding. Um, Meaning that you have sound waves, right?
Yep.
And that range is typically what they call, the you know uh, what I what I believe is the decibel range. So um, the plus or minus 12, um, or actually no, it's uh, I mean, they're saying 0 is the full volume and negative 60 is the silence, but I'm not quite sure, what that is in relation to the actual sine wave of of the volume. You know, is negative 60, the flat line, like nothing's there, where, 0 decibels is something that's like a constant or something like that. I don't know.
I don't know.
Or maybe that's like the semitones or something. I mean, I have basic understanding, but I'm not that familiar with what's going on there. So, um, okay. So, oh boy, this is going to be one tough session, my friend.
Yep.
um, I'm almost thinking if this keeps on going the way it is, and I'm almost half inclined on saying let's maybe skip this one because
Most.
we might be out of our league on this.
I already feel that we're out of our league on this one.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, and I feel like, you know, this would be great for an actual sound engineer,
Yeah.
but for us being programmers the way that we are, we'd have to take on like we'd have to learn about sound engineering before we consider taking this on right at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, so vote for skip.
Yeah. I'd say we skip this one.
Okay. Yeah.
Or at least skip it for the moment. If we ever come across a point when we need it, then we'll come back to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're gonna be using this at some point in the future, then we're probably gonna need to really go in depth on actual sound design and the like to figure out how we can mix, various, you know, soundtracks or whatnot together. Because right now, I don't feel like this audio modulation overview is a good starting point for us.
Nope.
So now, again, it'd probably be fantastic for someone that's already been there, that knows the core mechanics of being a sound engineer. They know exactly everything that they're kind of talking about on this, but for us, sorry, don't know enough. So,
No.
okay, so we move on. Go to audio.
Yeah, that's one.
Go
Yeah,
go to
the
audio
audio
volume.
volume.
Okay. For those of you that are like on, wait, I thought you were going to be talking about this. Well,
We
um,
don't understand it enough.
the fact that it shows advanced here at the very top of the audio modulation is, um, you know, already kind
It's
of
more for
showing.
someone that understands audio altogether, that
Yeah,
has done some form of audio engineering of some sort.
yeah. So, um, I haven't had a need to do that in the past, and
Neither have I.
personally, I wouldn't really want to know that. But again, you and I, for future work, we may need to put that on. So just we'll
Yeah.
but we'll get to that if that comes about.
Yeah.
And obviously we can't really ignore it if it does. If it rears its ugly head, then we're gonna have to face it head on.
Yep.
So, but for right now, I think we're gonna need to kind of skip it and let's move on to the audio volume, which again, we got ourselves quite a bit of information here as well. So, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so an overview of the audio volume actor settings. Okay, so um, I mean we played around with audio volume before.
So I
Um,
just expand upon it a little bit, maybe.
yeah. Well, we'll probably talk about, everything that you might see and use and so on and so forth. So, all right. With the audio volume actor, you can define areas within a blueprint map that can be used to process sounds. Then use these sounds to apply reverb effects, set volumes, define the zones affected, emulate occlusion on the sound, and define the shape of the sound volume. So transform settings change the location, rotation, and scale. Use these settings to ensure that the audio volume encompasses the area in which you want the sound to be processed. So the location of origin. Rotation determines the rotation of audio volume. Scale determines the size of the audio volume. So it's just,
Pretty basic stuff.
Yeah, you know, where's that volume? Where is it located at? How large is it going to be? And do we need to kind of rotate it to kind of put it into one particular space or not? So,
Yeah.
like, do we want, it to be like a wall that's, 1,000 meters up in the sky, or do we want it to be, like along the ground? You know, do we want it to be like the,
Staircase going upwards.
yeah, do we want it to be the full skyscraper itself? You never know. Um, you know, audio volume. The audio volume settings define which volume settings are used when there are overlapping volumes. Okay, so um, priority determines the priority of the audio volume, which is used to ensure that in the case of overlapping or nested volumes, the correct volume is applied. The higher the number used, the higher the priority. When two overlapping volumes have the same priority, no priority is used. So bear that in mind. Enable toggles audio volume on and off. Okay. Why you would have the audio volume off is odd if you're like entering, like say you're entering a skyscraper or something like that, and you have a volume for that skyscraper, but you turn it off for some reason. So maybe it's more along the lines of, hey, maybe you need to have it turn on after a certain period of time. Like, hey, you enter the building, nothing's happening, so you're just kind of walking up flights of stairs or something like that, and then suddenly like the lights turn off, and then you enable this audio that has a lot of people like screaming or something like that. Who knows, right?
Probably. Yeah. Just probably to switch between audios.
Yeah. Or maybe you want um maybe you want to remove like the audio or music like instantaneously or something like that. Like, hey, you need it like dead quiet at this particular moment in time during this particular event, so you can like turn it off right then and there.
Mm.
Now, priority, I'm not quite sure how they kind of work that. Like, um, like sure, you have one has higher priority over the other. Well, that's all well and good, but what happens when you have, like it says, overlapping? If one has priority over the other, does it mean that the one audio volume only gets only has control of the audio, so you'll never hear the second priority? Or is it,
This is. I'm guessing this is more useful if you have an audio volume within another. You're inside one audio volume, then you walk to the one nested inside of it. Which would you want to hear? The one inside or the one out or the one outside? The
yeah.
player would tell it, okay, you went inside the second audio volume nested inside. This is gonna take priority now.
I mean, I guess that would work. Um, if you consider like the inner to be the higher priority over the outer, that that kind of makes sense. Obviously, especially if you have like a soundproof room or something like that, right? You're only hearing what's inside that soundproof room versus everything outside of it. And once you leave that soundproof room, you hear all the ambient noise outside of that room, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it makes sense. So in the image below, small areas nested inside a larger one. Each space has its own audio volume. Note the yellow volume outlines around the two spaces for defining the different reverbs and ambient zone settings. If the listener is within the smaller space, they are inside both of the audio volumes. It's also so it's necessary to define how the audio engine chooses which audio volume to use. When the audio volumes overlap, the one with a higher priority is used by the audio engine. In this case, it would make sense that the larger volume um, is makes sense to set the larger audio volume to 1 and the smaller to 2. This way, when the smaller space, the appropriate reverb and ambient zone settings are used. Okay, so reverb. You can use the reverb settings to turn audio volume on or off. Select the reverb preset for use when activated. And define the volume of the reverb signal and fade time between reverb settings. Okay. Excuse me. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just jotting.
Mhm.
Apply reverb. Enables or disables a reverb effect assigned below. Reverb effect determines the reverb effect asset that will be used. There are a number of reverb presets included within the engine content, or you can create your own reverb effect assets within the content browser. Reverb plugin effect determines the reverb plugin effect that will be used. If you're using a third-party audio plugin, such as Google Resonance, okay, select the reverb effect that the plugin will use from the drop-down menu options. Okay, volume. Set the volume level for the reverb effect. This default setting is 0.05 or 0.5. Fade time. The time in seconds it takes to interpolate from the current reverb settings to the new ones as you enter and leave audio volumes. Determines the transition times between the areas within the level. There is a balance to be struck between how responsive the system is and how much movement the settings have to make to reach the new values. For example, you are moving from the space with very little reverb to one with very long reverb times. Then you might want to use longer transition times to avoid abrupt changes when moving between spaces. A move between spaces with similar reverb settings could transition more quickly. Hmm. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I kind of know what they're referring to by reverb for the most part, but I think it'd probably be best if we kind of ex, explore that a little bit more, or try to play around with that.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, unless you're comfortable with, with everything that they're kind of talking about here. Um, but it might be something that we might need to consider messing around with a little bit. Um,
Well, at some point, probably, yeah.
yeah, like maybe at the very end of this audio volume, we should probably go back, use one of our builds that we have, and then just, I mean, we already have one with some audio volumes already in there. So what we could do is we can start like messing around with these values like one at a time,
Yeah,
and
probably.
kind of see what it does. You know, so as a possibility.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so brush settings. Brush settings define the overall shape of the audio volume and set the initial size of the volume before scaling values from above are applied. Hmm. Okay. Before the scaling values of the above are applied. Okay, so the brush settings are applied first and then the scaling values. So we'll need to remember that.
Okay.
So select the brush shape for the audio volume that would provide best coverage for the area. The remaining settings below brush shape change based on the shape chosen. So you can use geometry editing mode to alter any of the shapes provided to create bespoke customized shapes that better fit specific areas within your level. Some brush shapes can be set to hollow, where this can work, for instance, when the audio volume only has an effect between the interior and exterior walls. It is not recommended for general audio use. The brush editor was primarily designed to build geometry for level designers, so some of the available shapes may be impractical for audio use. So, alright. So, I mean, you know, could be quite handy if you want to say, do something that, um, like you want to make not necessarily a box because that's like the default preset, but maybe you want to do like a cylinder, or maybe you need to do a sphere for some reason, um, depending on what you're trying to go for, right? So,
Yeah.
brush shapes. Click the Brush Shape drop-down menu to display and select from the list of built-in shapes. So you have Box, the default shape that shows up as Cube Builder in the drop-down menu. This shape produces a cube-shaped audio volume. For a brush box shape, the following options are available. The X, Y, and Z determines the initial size of the box-shaped audio volume when it is first created. These values are then scaled according to the values of the scale property above. Wall thickness. Only active when the hollow option is enabled, and determines the thickness of the walls if the audio volume is set to be hollow. Hollow determines whether the audio volume is hollow. Okay. This is an inherited feature from the parent volume class and is not recommended for general audio use. So, interesting about the whole hollow and wall thickness. Um, what's going on there? Um, oh, we may need to kind of play
I'm
around
guessing
with.
that might fall more into the sound effects, maybe. Like maybe you're hitting a wall and you want to just make a sound whether it's hollow or not.
I don't think it's something that is like specific to like actual sound effects. Like it's hollow. I think it has something to do with like, hey, you want um like you have a set size of your audio volume, but yet you might not necessarily want to create like another audio volume, so you kind of create like a wall around the volume in some way that has a certain space that can or cannot hear what you want to have happen within audio volume, but at the same time, it's like, you know, um, seems kind of odd to not necessarily have that enabled, or it would seem a little weird to be like, hey, um, here's where you hear fire, but as soon as you get past that point, it's like that fire goes out. You're no longer hearing it, so. Mm, just seems a little odd. That's all.
Hmm.
Yeah. We'll move on, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. Unless you have some questions yourself or
No,
some more
not
thought
at the
lines.
time.
Yeah. Okay, so cone or cone builder. Select cone builder in the drop-down menu to produce a cone-shaped audio volume. The, the following options are available for the shape. Z determines the initial height of the cone. Okay. From base to tip, it is then scaled according to the Z value within the scale property under transform settings. Cap Z, only active when the hollow option is enabled. It determines the height of the inner cone. Okay, makes sense. Um, so basically, if you have hollow where I guess you have a portion on like the edge of the cone that is, in a sense, hollowed out, then you have the Z of like the full height of the cone, and then you have the cap Z that's, a little bit smaller than the cone or the initial cone that might actually have all the audio that you need it to have. So, outer radius, the initial radius of the cone shape audio volume, which is then scaled according to the XY values of the scale property under transform settings. This allows you to produce non-symmetrical cones. Inner radius, only active when the hollow option is enabled. This determines the radius of the inner cone. So, now, um,
We might need to experiment with that a little bit in order to properly understand it.
I mean, I'm kind of okay. I kind of get what's kind of being talked about a little bit, but it might be a little difficult for me to explain, but I can try if you want me to.
Up to you.
Um, so think of it as think of I'm gonna change the shape. Okay, instead of cones, I'm gonna kind of talk about boxes, right? So if you have, say, like a general box, right? And you have you know um you have a certain size of it, right? You have the certain um the height, the width, um the length of the box, right? Um but you wouldn't necessarily call this a hollow in their eyes, right? Because it's just one simple box, right? When you apply hollow, what you're basically doing is you're kind of, I guess you're kind of taking a portion of that box and saying that, hey, that's where the actual audio is going to be at. So instead of, it's like taking your smaller box here, putting it into like, or taking a larger box and putting the smaller box inside of it, and that smaller box is considered the hollow, or where the audio actually is. What happens outside of it, I don't know. That's something that we'll have to kind of experiment with, right?
Yeah.
Um, and when you have a hollow, you have to not only determine the size of the large box, but you also have to determine the size of the small box. If the small box goes beyond the size of the larger box, then you're like, okay, what's going on here, right? And that doesn't really make any sense. It might provide an error for you or something like that along those lines. You never know, right?
Right.
Um, but the inner box is basically that hollow section that you're hearing the audio for, right? So it's going to be the same kind of thing with the cone. You're, think of it like those little cone birthday hats or something like that, right? Um, what they're saying is that instead of one cone, that you're just kind of putting it on top of your head, right? When you select hollow, you're basically creating another smaller cone to kind of be fitting inside that larger one. So in a sense, you're basically wearing two hats on your head, right? For for a cone, right?
Right.
So obviously the inner cone is probably going to be where you hear the volume. The outer cone, who knows what's going to happen there?
Maybe
Maybe
you hear it like maybe muffled or something.
I don't know. I don't know how they go about handling the hollow versus non-hollow audio for the most part. But um, they have something going on there for some reason. Why? I don't know. I don't know why they would have a hollow um and not worry about or not use like another audio volume, right? Or maybe they want to do it that way, so maybe it makes it easier for whoever's making these audio volumes, right? To say like, hey, I need I want that audio in the middle. I need a cutoff of that audio when you leave that center cone. And then when you gets to the outside, you know, or the hollow portion of it, then who knows what happens there? But I don't know. Um,
That's what I mean, but we'll probably have to experiment and see how the audio reacts with the hollow setting.
yeah. Um, I I I wonder if there's gonna be like a setting that we can set up that will basically say, hey, um, show where these areas are for me so that I know, where I'm at because I don't know if the hollow is going to be, um, it might be a little weird trying to do like an inner, a hollow, and then the outer, you know, how does it,
Hmm.
what does it put in the hollow? How does it handle the hollow? I'm not sure.
Hmm.
So, but it's the only thing that I can think of based off of what they're kind of talking about here.
Yeah.
Because they're talking about outer radius, inner radius, and so on and so forth. So, the sides is also kind of weird. There determines the number of sides of the cone, and it's like, well, a cone is typically referred to as, like a circle or oval or whatever, you know, that's kind of tapered off at the end. So, or cylinder that's kind of tapered off in the end. So sides wouldn't necessarily that to me doesn't necessarily apply. But at the same time, I can understand them needing to use sides as well because um, maybe you have like a board that has those number of sides or something like that. You never know, right?
Yeah, you
Um,
never know.
but um, it makes me wonder if I basically put down like the number of sides equals to 0, is it going to be a full-on circle? You know, I don't know. Um, so Hollow determines whether the audio volume is hollow. This is an inherited feature from the parent volume class and is not recommended for general audio use. So, hmm, yeah. Alright, well, I think that's gonna be about it, my friend. I think we're gonna have to hold off on the rest for tomorrow.
Yeah, the rest is just explaining what settings you'll have access to based on each shape. It's
Yeah,
not adding much. Like the only difference that these shapes don't have the most of these shapes don't have the hollow setting. The cylinder has hollow setting, but the stairs, the curves. Excuse me, I lost my voice there. The curved stair, straight stair, and sphere don't have hollow.
yeah,
They just have different settings, and that's it. That's all it shows.
yeah. Which is a little interesting in the like the curved stair, for example. It's um like maybe I mean I could see them trying to do something along those lines for like um obviously if you're like walking up and down stairs, right, you might have like a little bit of an echo, or you might hear your footsteps or something like that based off of the pathing or something like that, right? But um you know how how would you go about having the player hear said footsteps kind of thing? Because what they're showing right now is like, hey, you have actual steps or something like that, right? But it's not necessarily like reversed, I guess you might say, where it's like, hey, if you're an actor, you're walking up those steps or something like that, um, you know, if you're outside of that zone, then you might not necessarily hear, you know, those stairs, those footsteps, right? Um, so you would think that it'd be like maybe kind of flipped around, like, so as you proceed upwards on the stairs or downwards on the stairs, you're kind of getting into the volume more or something like that. I don't know. Just seems a little odd. That's all. You know, like you'd have to have the ears of the player kind of matching with each increment of the step as you kind of proceed upwards, right? So, mm, all right. Well, something for us to kind of look at a little bit more tomorrow,
Mm,
and you
yeah,
know,
the curved stairs I see are more like just make it you cover the. Remember, this is just volume. This is where it's gonna house the audio, like the ambient audio. Like, just make it the size that it fits the whole curved area, so that you don't have to use multiple of these. And
well,
then you
what I'm saying is that okay, take for
like
example,
this isn't gonna be something you're gonna like step on. Like the audio is gonna be inside of it. Your character's gonna be running inside of this, not over it.
well, that's my problem with what they're kind of showing though, is the fact that this looks as though you're stepping, this looks as though you're stepping on the stairs as you proceed upwards. It's not something like you're being included in the volume itself as you proceed up the stairs, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It
The
it
example measured that way, but like from what we tested when using the volume, we hear the things when we're inside of it. This is just using as an example to show, okay, this is how it might look like.
right. But that, I mean, again, that doesn't necessarily make too much sense um because you might want the volume on the lower step to be kind of larger overall, based off of the ceiling, right? From stair to ceiling, that's where that's where the player is going to be at, right? So you would think that that would be larger and compared to the next step where, the ceiling might stay the same, but the step, is going up a little bit larger, right? So you would think that that would be, kind of like a smaller volume on the smaller step, right? Or the lower step. And you kind of proceed onwards up until the final step, which has the smallest volume area based off of, step to ceiling, right? So that's why this diagram is slightly weird to me because it's kind of doing the exact reverse as though um, it's basically saying, hey, here's the steps themselves, and when you step on them, maybe they cause some form of, like maybe the steps themselves have some form of um, effect to kind of like echo throughout the room or something like that. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Hmm. No.
So just seems a little off. That's all. But obviously we'll figure that out tomorrow. Well,
Yeah, but we haven't gone to the sound effect part, so we don't even know how that even applies.
yeah. But it just kind of feels odd. That's all. I mean, now it might be like they give like an ambient value to the steps anyway. Like, they basically say, hey, you know, yeah, if you're inside this volume, then you hear these things like super loud. Like maybe you're like directly under the staircase, like you're Harry Potter or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
it can be used in that scenario. Like you put this underneath the stairs, and you have one audio inside of it, and the other audio outside of it.
yeah. Like, if you're Harry Potter and you're like living under the stairs, and obviously, you're hearing, different sounds inside that volume, whereas if you're like walking down the stairs, then you would have to be like in a different volume, audio volume, because all you would be hearing would be like, your footsteps and maybe the creaking of the stairs as you're walking down or something like that, or whatever, depending on what you're walking down, right? You know, like the cracking of wood, a metallic sound, whatever, right? Whereas, if you're actually in underneath it, then you might be hearing, even more. Like it's kind of, uh, maybe you have more of a reverb going on there, right? Where it's kind of bouncing around in that particular volume or something like that. I don't know.
Hmm.
Just just kind of throwing out ideas or something like that. But yeah. All right, man. I think that's where we're gonna go ahead and stop off for tonight, for today.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm gonna
I,
go get something to eat before.
yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, we may, we'll look at these other options for some of these. Like some of them are probably gonna be self-explanatory for the most part, but
Yeah, I'm getting
others,
interested in testing out that hollow function and see how the audio reacts with that hollow function on.
same, same. So,
I do feel from what it feels almost like the main audio is inside of it, and in the inside one, and the outside maybe we get like an echo or a muffle or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like figuring out how the audio will react would be nice.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to test it out. So we'll have to kind of work on that tomorrow. Um, one of the things that I'm kind of interested in is the sphere or the tetrahedron builder. You
Hmm.
know, figure out what they're kind of using there because they only have two options there. So that's what I'm kind of curious about personally. Um, but obviously, everything else is pretty much the same for the most part. Not much change there. So, um,
Yeah.
but I mean, we'll cover that tomorrow. So, all right, my friend. Um, well, that's where we're gonna go ahead and end our session for now.
Yeah.
We'll cover this again tomorrow. Um, Probably not going to be going to the next section of the convoluted reverb until like maybe the day after. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, I'll let you know now that Saturday might not be able to make it since on Saturday is gonna be my grandma's birthday.
okay,
I don't know exactly what we're gonna do and if I'll have energies left, but if I can make it to do any Unreal, so maybe on Saturday I'm not gonna do.
okay. Then I will consider it as you let me know if you can make it. Otherwise, I'll be under the assumption that you won't be.
Yeah,
Okay.
most likely won't.
So so you let me know if you can make it, and then I'll change accordingly. But for the time being, I'll just make the assumption that you won't be able to make the an Unreal session that day, and we'll continue the convolution reverb on say Sunday. Okay?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's no problem with that. I mean, obviously, um, you know, on one hand, it's like sure, we'd probably want to try to get as quickly as we can to making our own product and stuff like that. But at the same time, rushing can also lead to problems.
Yeah.
We might miss something that might be very essential for us in the future, and that one thing that we could have read might have solved all of our problems or something like that. You never know, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So better to be prepared than shoot ourselves in the foot. So,
Yeah.
all right then. Well, you enjoy your food. Um, um, Enjoy Star Rail.
Yep.
Um, Let me know if you wanna wanna chat or something like that. I'll be on the stage. So, um,
Yeah, we'll probably be start off maybe grinding a little bit for some better relics before
yeah,
continuing the main story and search for Fu's ascension materials.
yeah. I think there's probably like one other relic set that I'm probably gonna be trying to grind for a little bit for one of my. I don't know if it's like for the controller or something like that. Hmm. Well, I'm gonna go
For
ahead
the
and
laser,
stop.
you mean?
I'm gonna go ahead and stop the video for the Unreal. So for those of you that are watching this, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. So catch you all next time.